Hello and welcome back to another episode of Viper Bytes. Today we're going to continue our training camp tour and head out west to the NFC West, where we're going to look at some of the camp battles that you need to be paying attention to for your 2021 fantasy football rosters and beyond that. Now we're going to make stops in Arizona, we're going to make a stop in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, and in Seattle. But first, we are going to be making that stop in the desert. We're going to head to Arizona right off the start and talk about the Arizona Cardinals.
Today for Murray, the Cardinals' leading rusher. He's going to try to run for some more here. Kyler Murray hops inside the 10. Murray turning on the speed, and Kyler Murray puts the Cardinals on top with 10:26 to go.
Murray fires, touchdown, and it's DeAndre Hopkins all alone in the...
Last year, we saw DeAndre Hopkins kind of take over for Larry Fitzgerald. We've seen Larry Fitzgerald he hasn't officially retired, but he hasn't signed anywhere yet. And I don't see him, if he's not signing with Arizona, I don't see him signing anywhere else. So what that means is the Arizona Cardinals went out and they signed themselves a little AJ Green, hopefully to play opposite of DeAndre Hopkins. That's to be seen. If AJ Green can stay healthy, I think it's a great addition, a nice dynamic duo. Another big target for Kyler Murray to look for, especially in the end zone. Now, where that problem is, AJ Green hasn't been healthy in the last couple of years. He's really been battling some nagging injuries. Let's face it, he's been battling the nagging Cincinnati Bengals as well. Now, what we want to see here is a battle between Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk, and Rondale Moore. Now, I'm not ruling out any of these guys to battle for a wide receiver 2 spot, but this is really looking like the wide receiver 3/slot corner or slot wide receiver kind of spot right now. And we've seen Christian Kirk. He's been decent over his tenure here with the Arizona Cardinals. He hasn't taken that leap to stardom that we would hope for by now. He's been able to play opposite of Larry Fitzgerald prior to DeAndre Hopkins coming to town, but never really took off with that role, averaging about 53 reception, 640 yards, and 5 touchdowns per season since he entered the league in 2018. And then we're going to probably see that role kind of diminish with AJ Green in tow there with the Cardinals, but we'll see how that shapes out. Now, another guy to keep an eye on in that slot role is Andy Isabella, who's been nothing but a disappointment, in my opinion. I know there's some Isabella truthers. I'll probably hear about this a little bit later, but you can't argue the numbers right now. He's had ample opportunity to seize control of the slot role going back to last year. And even his first 2 years as a rookie, 9 catches, 189 yards, 1 touchdown. Last year as a sophomore, 21 receptions, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns. Those numbers do not scream that you are going to be set for stardom as a major cog in this offense. Now, saying that, he had 306 offensive snaps in 2020. That was an increase on 2019 where he saw 157 snaps. And here's the thing. The Cardinals, they went off and they got Green. Then they went off and drafted the next receiver we're going to talk about, Rondale Moore. That's probably more telling to me that Andy Isabella and Christian Kirk are likely not going to be the long-term solution in the desert there. Now, the thing with Rondale Moore, drafted 49th overall, wide receiver out of Purdue, dude is a freak of nature. You can talk about his size, you can knock him all you want there, but the dude is a baller. He can go out there and absolutely crush it. As a freshman, he put up insane numbers. I think he had about 1,258 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns. And did this but he only managed to play 7 games as a sophomore and a senior. These are numbers that the Cardinals are banking on him with that explosiveness, that explosive play personality that he's kind of got, a little jet sweep action, a little short hitters. These are the things that they're hoping are going to happen in the desert to make that offense a little bit more fluid. Now, the other battle to watch here is at the running back position between Chase Edmonds and James Conner. My early indication is that this is going to be a timeshare between Edmonds and Conner. We're going to see about a 50-50 split here. Probably Conner getting the early downs and the goal line back, short yardage type stuff. And Chase Edmonds kind of coming in as a third down back, change of pace kind of guy, receiving back based on what we've seen in the past. Let's be honest. If Chase Edmonds is all that we want him to be and all that Twitter is blowing up him to be, he probably would have been able to beat out Kenyon Drake last year based on all that hype that we're giving him right now, and I'm not quite sold on him. Now, as a 4th rounder in 2018, his numbers haven't screamed workhorse back. Now, I understand that he's had to share that backfield. He's kind of played second fiddle, but he only has that 100-yard rushing game to his credit right now. although he has been a very good receiver out of the backfield with 53 receptions, 402 yards, a couple touchdowns, I think 4 in 2020. So that's kind of gives you an idea what I think Chase Edmonds really is and what he brings to the table. Now, James Conner, on the other hand, he hasn't been the James Conner of early lure in Pittsburgh. He came onto the scene, absolutely dominated that backfield, and then kind of seen himself fade out of the picture based on injury and based on a lot of other different things, but he has not been effective. So I think if you can take this one of two ways, Chase Edmonds is the man because they only brought James Conner in to back him up, no real competition, or they don't really trust Chase Edmonds and need that veteran presence. Which side you lie on? I don't know. I think Chase Edmonds is going to have the more dynamic PPR value at the running back position. And James Conner is probably going to steal a lot of those touchdowns. He's going to be a short yardage guy a la LeGarrette Blount a few years back for the New England Patriots. I think that's what you can expect out of him. And I do believe, now talking back to the wide receiver position, Christian Kirk is going to be that guy in that slot role where he's going to see the most opportunity there. Now, we're going to head to the Bay next. We're going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. They've had a little bit of change there. They're looking to improve on last year's numbers.
Garoppolo to throw. Mostert with an opening. Mostert's got great speed and nobody in front of him. Raheem Mostert is going to take it to the house, galloping in for a 76-yard touchdown. Well, four-man Cardinal rush. Garoppolo to Kittle, and Kittle down.
You need two. Ooh, he has Kittle.
And there's Kittle across the field, first down.
Now, I hope you really paid attention there because there wasn't very many snaps after that that Jimmy Garoppolo actually played football in San Francisco last year. There's going to be a battle at the quarterback position between Jimmy G and the rookie Trey Lance. Now, the 49ers went out and they got him early. He is their top selection in 2020, and rightfully so. Out of North Dakota State, guy absolutely balled out going back to 2019, didn't play 2020. Sat out most of that season. I think he had the one game, kind of a little bit of getting that rust off him there. Didn't really impress a whole lot, but the skills, the raw abilities, everything's there that you could want in a quarterback. Just got to do some fine tuning there, kind of like Josh Allen, so to speak. Now, the Niners ended their offseason program June 9th. Jimmy Garoppolo remained atop the depth chart with Lance sitting in that second spot. Lance is expected to surpass Garoppolo at some point this season, but when is kind of hard to predict at this time. I really think that we're going to see Garoppolo start the season and go into if San Francisco continues to win, I think Garoppolo stays in that seat until he's injured, which, let's be honest, is going to happen at some point, unfortunately. Now, we kind of look at these other things here. Garoppolo had a decent 2019, but that's really his only quality in the league. I talk about, you look at these numbers, he's a 4,000-yard passer here. In 2017, 2018, and 2020, he only had about 267 completions, missing 23 games in that kind of that span. Really tough to kind of get a good feel of what the 49ers really have in Jimmy G. I think when they made the trade, they had an idea what they were going to get from him when they got him over from New England, but we just haven't seen that materialize yet. And that's why we've seen Trey Lance drafted as high as he was, why the 49ers felt it was important to get that quarterback, especially to compete in that NFC West, which we have some of the top teams in the league, very competitive overall. But we want to see this Konami code kind of quarterback coming out here now. We've seen it everywhere. It's moving around. Trey Lance fits that bill. He can beat you with his legs. He can beat you with his arms. He is the future, but right now it's Jimmy G's job. And I think as long as San Francisco continues to win and they have a team that could push for the Super Bowl, Jimmy G stays in that seat. Now, at the running back position, we have Raheem Mostert, who gets a lot of disrespect, very low draft capital to undrafted type thing. Trey Sermon's coming in, Elijah Mitchell coming in. Now, I really look at this as kind of funny because you have Raheem Mostert and Jeffrey Wilson already in tow. Jeffrey Wilson obviously going to miss some time due to injury, but they basically now have, with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell, their new version of Raheem Mostert and Jeffrey Wilson. Both Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell come in from the respective programs there at Louisiana and Ohio State, not as the guy, but as a very strong 1A, 1B type combination there, which they did very well in college. And I think that's going to translate to the National Football League as well. Now, talking about Mostert there, he accumulated 1,293 yards rushing over the last two seasons, 241 carries, 5.4 5.4 yards per carry in that time. He finished 2020 on the IR with that high ankle sprain. He's had some knee injuries, missed some OTAs. Not very effective in the passing game. That's kind of the knock on Mostert. That's why they got Jeffrey Wilson there. Trey Sermon, they selected him 88th overall. He comes in after 3 years at Oklahoma, played at Ohio State, kind of finishes his career there. Good size, 6'1", 215. Finishes 4-year collegiate career with 455 carries, 2,946 yards, 26 touchdowns. That works out to about a 6.5 yards per carry. And you can see why they felt the need to go get this guy. Now with Elijah Mitchell, he seems to be the forgotten guy. No one wants to talk about the later drafted running backs from the smaller schools, but let's not forget how dominant he was in 3 years at Louisiana, which he split some carries with Trey Regis there, but we'll talk about that later. 527 carries, 3,267 yards, 41 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per carry. Now, taken in the 6th round, 194th overall, that kind of tells you that they feel a little bit stronger about Trey Sermon, but don't let Elijah Mitchell and that low draft capital fool you. He's a real player when it comes down to this. I don't think he's going to step in this year, but for me, it's Mostert as the number 1 running back there. I think Trey Sermon is the true backup to Mostert, but I think Elijah Mitchell is going to come in there as the passing guy, especially while Jeffrey Wilson's down, and this could earn him a role moving forward. Now, we need to move on to Seattle here, so let's cue this video.
Off the fake, Wilson rolling, dumps it to the goal line for Carson, and it's a touchdown for the Seahawks. Past week, in fact, a few of them on Friday, including Dalvin Cooks.
How about them running backs all getting paid?
Alvin Kamara got paid as well. This guy's been paid. Russell Wilson. He surpasses 4,000 rushing yards
Here during their video conferencing meetings.
Wilson will dump it off for Carson here with blockers in front. Chris Carson, touchdown.
First off, I got to start this off. Why does everybody hate Chris? I'm talking about Chris Carson here. He must be the most disrespected running back in the National Football League. I know he's had some injury history. I know he had that hip injury a couple years back. But when he's in the lineup, he is among the best in the league. He's borderline RB1 year in, year out. If he can stay healthy, I'm not calling him injury prone, but if he can take care of some of these nagging injuries, he is the man you want to own on your rosters. I mean, you're getting him in the 5th round in fantasy drafts. This guy is an absolute steal right now. We need to put some respect on Chris Carson's name. Now we're going to talk about the backups to Chris Carson. If there were something to happen to Chris Carson, who's that guy to step up? And the first guy we're going to look at here is Rashad Penny. We've been waiting for Rashad Penny to step up for 2 years now. When the Seattle Seahawks invested a 1st-round draft capital in him with Chris Carson still on the roster, people were starting to get up in arms here thinking, okay, you know what? Chris Carson's time is done. Rashad Penny's the guy. He put about these huge college numbers at San Diego State. This is the guy we want. This is the guy. He's the next best thing when it comes to fantasy football. It has not happened, and it will not happen. You heard it here. I'll say it again, but I'll throw some numbers at you just because I know people like to see numbers. Rashad Penny, in 3 seasons, 161 carries. Injured all the time. 27 of 48 games. That is, your best ability is your availability, and Rashad Penny hasn't been available. Now, when you're taking 27th overall, after putting up 2,248 yards with a 7.8 yards per carry at San Diego State, you're expected to come in and be able to do something. Is this the year that we're going to see something? I wouldn't bet on it. Now, while we were waiting for Penny to do something, we also got a little glimpses of DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. First, DJ Dallas, 38th pick of the 4th round, 34 carries, 108 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Nothing to really look at as a rookie there. And the 17 receptions, 111 yards, 1 touchdown. But guess what? Nothing special in college either. You look at his 3 years, 265 carries, 1,527 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry. He only had more than 23 touches in 1 game last year, and that was for 58 yards against San Francisco back in Week 8. And then you flip it over to Travis Homer out of the University of Miami. Rarely used his first 2 years, 63 touches. Week 17, he had a little bit of a show there. He did, but you know what? I don't think we're not going to see these numbers out of Travis Homer. And if Chris Carson were to go down, I don't know if there's a running back on this roster currently that they're going to be able to rely on. If they can help, if Rashad Penny can stay healthy, maybe that's the route they go. But you know what? I'll believe that when I see it as well. Now, the other thing we talk about is Pete Carroll versus the passing game. Now, when we look at these numbers in 2020, pass attempts, you're looking at about a 59.6% completion percentage. That's 14th in the league. In 2019, 54.3, 27th in the league. 2018, 47.6, 32nd in the league. We've seen a little bit of an increase in that passing. Russ has finished 9th in passer rating in 22 with a 105.1 passer rating. Sacked roughly three times per game along that, which is 29th, 3 times in 2019 on average. And in 2018, 3 times again. There's kind of a common denominator here. Russell Wilson is not getting the time needed if he's getting sacked 3 times per game. So what do? They look at that O-line. It kind of rate in 2020, they've improved it. They kind of made the right steps. They were rated about 14th in the league last year compared to 2019 where they were 27th and 2018 where they're 18th. Now, when you look at the rushing attempts in 2020, they were 18th in the league with 25.6, which is a huge drop off from 2019 where they're 3rd in the league with 29.5 carries per game. And back in 2018, they had 32.8 carries per game, which ranked 2nd. So we've seen a bit of more of a commitment to the passing game, a little less from the running game as we're moving forward. Sounds like Pete Carroll's finally coming around. Does that take that next step? Do we see 64% going into 2021? When you have an elite passer like Russell Wilson, you need to make sure you utilize that, especially when you're giving the guy a 4-year deal, $140 million guaranteed. $140 million contract with only $107 guaranteed. Sorry, my number is a little off. Now, speaking of big-time elite players, you're going to find a lot of elite-type people in Hollywood, and we're going to head over to Los Angeles next, talk about the Los Angeles Rams.
Reynolds goes in motion, rolling to his left. The pass is caught here by Robert Woods, and the former Buffalo Bills. In motion off the play fake. Backside screen here to Robert Woods. His second catch inside the 30. A little hurdle job there. Take a room. Hand it to Robert Woods. Around the end he goes. Rams love to use the wide receivers on running play. Down and five.
Man, we just talked about Chris Carson being disrespected perennially as a running back. Well, is there a wide receiver that gets as little respect as what Robert Woods gets year in and year out? All he does is flirt with being an RB1, and we value him as a wide receiver 3, and that's not right. And you're going to see Matt Stafford come to Hollywood here, and we're going to see guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods absolutely take off. We'll talk about that wide receiver 3 position here shortly, but let's talk about Matt Stafford. The single biggest news coming there before the Cam Akers injury, which I don't want to get into it. I'm not quite over that. I'm still going through the stages of grief right now over Cam Akers being injured and being lost for the season with that Achilles. So I'm trying not to mention him from this point on. Now, with Matt Stafford, you know, we're talking about a guy since 2009 who is probably one of the top quarterbacks in the National Football League. Over 165 games. He has nearly 3,900 completions on just over 6,200 attempts. Since 2009 till this day, like today, right now, like before the season even starts, that's a 62.6 completion percentage, over 45,000 yards in that time, 282 touchdowns, 144 interceptions. We know he ain't going to run. That ain't no big deal. But he does have 345 rushing yards for almost 1,200 yards on the ground since 2009. That's not too bad. There's quarterbacks who've ran a lot less. In Detroit, he was never supported, never given that cast. He's got Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Darrell Henderson, Tyler Higbee, if you want to throw him in. These are all upgrades on what he had last year, especially after Kenny Golladay went down, and we've seen the Quintus Cephas, and I can't even remember all the guys from the Detroit Lions. It's not even worth trying to go for, but Matt Stafford is a warrior. He battles. He's played with a broken back and broken ribs and everything you name. He's played with everything broken except his spirit. Now, we talk about the supporting cast. He's only had that one major weapon. That was Calvin Johnson way back when. Kenny Golladay never really materialized for him. Never really had the 1,000-yard rusher. Never had that running back. He had Reggie Bush kind of in 2013 where he just had over 1,000 yards. I'm expecting Matt Stafford to have a monster season here. I'm talking about, you can talk about these weapons again. I mentioned the first few guys. We got Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson, Tutu Atwell. These guys are all going to factor in. This is by far his best supporting cast. I would venture to guess, I'm going to say Matt Stafford cracks the top 8 in fantasy points for quarterbacks this year. Mark my words for that. I love Matt Stafford, and you're going to get him at a discount in any draft you're doing right now. Startup drafts, I think he's going to be a great value moving forward. Now let's talk about those weapons. We don't need to talk about Kupp. We don't need to talk about Robert Woods. We should talk about Robert Woods. More people need to be talking about him. I'm not even going to bother wasting my time with Tyler Higbee or Darrell Henderson because we know how that's going to shape out. What we need to talk about here is Van Jefferson versus Deshaun Jackson versus Tutu Atwell. Now, Van Jefferson is a 2020 second rounder. As a rookie, he had 19 catches, 220 yards, 1 touchdown. At 6'2", 200 pounds, he's more of an outside wide receiver, which I think that's where that need is right now. You've already got Cooper Kupp probably locking down the slot. Robert Woods can play the slot. He can play the outside. You can move Robert Woods wherever you want because Robert Woods is good. This is basically turning into a nice little hype video for Robert Woods. I don't know if you picked that up yet. But, if we're looking at a guy who's averaged some big numbers over his career, Deshaun Jackson is a guy who interests me big time, especially in best ball. The wily old vet, Matt Stafford's going to be able to let that rocket arm go. Deshaun Jackson, he's only managed to play 8 games of 23 receptions over the last 2 years. I think this is going to be I think we're going to see him kind of revert back to 2016 here, when was the last time he had 1,000 yards receiving. And he's over here on a cheap deal. 1 year, $4.5 million, only $2.75 is guaranteed. A nice little prove-it type deal, so to speak, and he's got that big weapon there. We've seen what he could do, what he does for offenses. You've already got Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp sucking teams in. Now you put someone like Deshaun Jackson with a quarterback that can absolutely let the ball go. I think you're going to see Deshaun Jackson have a huge season this year. For me, he's the wide receiver 3 on this team. I think he's going to have a solid value for you moving forward. Now, Tutu Atwell, we talked about Rondale Moore being small. This dude's small. I think he's like $110. I don't know what his actual weight is, but he's tiny. I think I got kids larger than he is. Now, he was drafted 57th overall. The official numbers I'm looking at here, he's 5'9", 175. I doubt that. I really doubt it. I don't think 175 is legit when we're talking about him. But, hey, you know what? That's what the numbers say, so we'll go with that. In 32 games at Louisville, he managed to have 139 receptions, 2,303 yards, 20 touchdowns, 16.6 yards per reception. So that's where you see where Tutu and Deshaun Jackson can come in and make a difference off the get-go at being able to stretch that field because teams are going to be paying attention to Kupp and Robert Woods, Bobby Trees, whatever you want to call them, the Los Angeles Elite. Now, I think Tutu is going to be able to get loose in the backfield, or in the secondary. I think Deshaun Jackson is going to be able to get loose there. But let's kind of take a look at what we can expect from Tutu Atwell. We're looking at a guy who runs about a 4.27 to a 4.3 240, average a touchdown every 7 receptions. And guess what? His comp is Deshaun Jackson. Now, if that's not telling you right there what to believe in, that's good enough for me. I think we're going to see Cooper Kupp do the slot thing, Robert Woods on one side, Van Jefferson on the outside. And even though Van Jefferson may get the more snaps, I think the better value is going to be in Deshaun Jackson, especially when it comes to fantasy points this year. With that all said, you are now covered in the NFC West. These are the training camp battles I'm watching. These are the things I'm expecting. Now make sure you tune in for more of these videos coming at you very shortly.